Is that pop? Like people are, oh wow. Aren't notaries very rare? Oh, they're not? I was kind of like saying, is anybody here a physicist? All right, guys, here you go, sign-in sheet. Pass that bad boy around. All right. Welcome to FAVOR Monday Night Family Group. A group for families on Monday night. Do you want to hear a story? You want to hear something interesting? Just an interesting observation. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in Narcotics Anonymous, they named the meetings after either whatever town it is or whatever streets it is on and whatever night of the week it is. So, did you spill some drink in my pristine group room? So where I got clean was called Verona Tuesday night. And then I would go to a meeting in Uniontown. It was called Uniontown Saturday Night. I started a meeting in Ligonier on Monday night. Guess what we called it? Ligonier Monday Night. Isn't that weird? Now, some places we get fancy and call it like, you know, from dope to hope. Or you know, love on the boulevard or something like that. But the groups I went to, we never did that. We were very straightforward, very serious groups. We were taking it very, very seriously. All right, so you guys, you know, you're here tonight. We're talking about family recovery. If you're in recovery, you're more than welcome to stay here. If you share, we want you to share from the perspective of helping the family, that kind of thing. I think most of the folks here are family members. Real quick, this is who I am professionally. I've been in the field for about 19 years, working in a wide variety of settings, clinical settings, community-based mental health. Had a private practice, still have a private practice, done a lot of interventions, run some treatment centers, that kind of thing. In addition to this, I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. So for me, it's, you know, alcohol use disorder was present before the opioids came on board, but really the thing that kind of destroyed me were prescription pain pills. In 1999, I was in a car accident. I was sitting at a red light. Now, again, I want to go on the record and say that I was not innocent. It wasn't like I walked into that emergency room and walked out addicted. That wasn't my story at all. I was already addicted to alcohol, but as you guys know, with alcohol, you can go on and on and on for years because it's socially acceptable and you can find a way to get through. I'm sitting at a red light. Truck just drives right into the back of me, totals my car. The ambulance comes, the police come. I get rushed off to the emergency room, and I walk out of that emergency room that day with 120 Darvocet. And within about 18 months, I was, you know, whatever term you want to use for that, full-blown addiction. You know, it's called opioid use disorder severe, with the technical terminology, going through withdrawal, that kind of stuff. And then, you know, fortunately, I've been in recovery for the last 18 years. That's when I got into the field. And so tonight, the goal is to talk about what is addiction. We're going to go over that really, really quickly. What is addiction? You know, kind of like what are the family options on dealing with addiction? And then I'm going to spend some time tonight and encourage you guys to also get involved in this. Just talking again about, we got the holidays coming up. We got stress involved with the holidays, with or without addiction being involved. It's a stressful period of time. If you're dealing with active addiction, or even if you're dealing with your loved one in early recovery, or really any stage of recovery, it can be a tense period of time. So we're going to talk about how to deal with stress and how to kind of like cope on our own, regardless of what's going on with our loved one, that kind of thing. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday whenever I ran into this situation. So I ran into it's interesting when articles are published on addiction, when things are published regarding the opioid epidemic, for example, the more outrageous they are, or the more they point out our government's stupidity. There's a direct correlation between the stupidity level and the amount of people that send me the article. Does that make sense? So the more ridiculous it is, I get like 25 different links of the same article. And as you guys know, I'm from Pennsylvania. And the state of Pennsylvania leads the nation in drug overdoses. More people died, 5,709 people died in the state of Pennsylvania of a drug overdose in 2017. 1,000 died here. So, I mean, I know it's a more populated state and we understand all that, but like you start to wrap your mind around exactly how bad it is in Pennsylvania. The American Medical Association has labeled Pennsylvania as a model state for dealing with the opioid epidemic. And it leads the nation in overdoses. So that was the article. As you can imagine, my inbox was flooded. Dude, what do you think about this? Dude, what do you think about this? Well, I think it's an indication of exactly like why we're in the situation that we're in. And the reason why I bring this up related to a family group is this is the sad state of affairs that we have, guys. You have to become your own experts. Because the experts literally think that if you lead the nation in overdose deaths, you're the model for the rest of the nation. And the article is bizarre, guys. It goes on. And at the end of the article, it's clear that the reporter must have said to the American Medical Association representative, this doesn't make any sense. How can they be a model program if everyone's dying? And the American Medical Association person said, well, it's not because they have a bad system, it's because fentanyl is so dangerous. Now, on first glance, you might say, well, that's a logical explanation, but think about that for a minute. That's like saying we don't have a solution for polio because polio is so bad. Do you get? But we're gonna celebrate the fact that we don't have a solution. I'm not saying Pennsylvania should have a solution, but we should certainly not be celebrating it. And so what this tells you is that it's not that you're on your own. There are good places you can get good help, but you have to become your own expert in these areas because the world has it. I mean, guys, we're not doing it. We're not doing well with this thing. We are not doing well with this epidemic or whatever you want to call it. It is getting worse year over year. Certain pockets are doing well. Certain people are doing well. Certain people are working hard. People are recovering, but they're not recovering at a higher rate. They're dying at a higher rate. So families, you almost have to become your own subject matter expert, for lack of a better term. Because you're probably going to have to figure this stuff out on the fly. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's part of what we're going to do tonight. That's part of what we do with the education. And ask questions along the way. And again, if you're in recovery here, make sure if you share, it's from a family perspective, not necessarily your own personal recovery. All right, so let's start with, if you're here and you're not sure what to do, regardless of whether you've just become aware that your loved one has a problem or perhaps you're dealing with a relapse, remember, this is our chart. These are, what are your options? We're going to talk through this, but this is the most common question that we get at FAVOR Greenville. What do I do? What do I do? I just found out Johnny was using. I just found pills in his room. What do I do? Susie was in rehab. She was doing well for 30 days. She's using again. What do I do? That's the most common question. And so for whatever the circumstance is, now this doesn't have the details on what you do in your particular circumstance. I'm going to give you a phone number that you can call at the end of this group that will give you the details. But this is the big picture options. The first thing you can do in any situation you're dealing with is nothing, right? You have the right to just monitor the situation, stand by, and at FAVOR Greenville, we respect you. We do not call you an enabler. We do not tell you that you're enabling your loved one to death or anything like that. If you want to just talk about it, you're allowed to call this phone number and just talk about it. Does that make sense? You can literally just vent. You're allowed to do that. What are the pros of doing nothing? It's what you're used to. It's probably not quite as emotional. You probably feel a little bit less risky because it's kind of like, hey, if I say something, they're going to lose their mind. The cons are you don't know exactly what they're up to, or it could be real, real dangerous. It's probably killing you. How's it killing you? Stress. Has anybody in here ever not slept? You two are the only two people that raised their hand. Every one of you in the room has not slept. It's okay to say that you're broken because of this issue. I've been broken because of this issue. You're not sleeping at night. You can't concentrate during the day. You're nervous. When the phone rings, you jump. You probably literally physically jump. That kind of thing. At the very least, your stomach starts to turn. That's called a post-traumatic stress response to a situation. And that's what I mean by it's destroying you. Do you guys get that? That's what I mean by it has nothing to do with your loved one. How long can you go? How much of a period of time can you go without sleeping? What's that like? I mean, you can do it one day. I didn't sleep last night because I had so much on my mind related to work. I got up and worked and stuff like that, but I'll go home tonight and crash. I can do it one day. Can you do it two? Maybe. Stretch it to 3. What if you're only getting 2 hours of sleep? It's going to start to take effect on your mental health and your physical health in a profound way. So that would be the cons of doing nothing. So that's the first option. You can do nothing. The second option is you can have a conversation with your loved one. Ideally, you would be able to get other people involved in the conversation. We call it a meeting. We call it a meeting to intervene, not an intervention. Now, I know that sounds silly, but an intervention is a very specific thing, right? So this is a meeting to intervene in the process and the progression of addiction. A meeting to intervene, what's the main objective? Anyone want to take a guess? Well, it could be to get them into treatment ultimately, but really the objective is to talk about the elephant in the room. Yes. To get it all out on the table. And after that conversation, you know, it's going to be different because we're all going to be on the same page. We're sitting down here at the kitchen table and we know, son, what you're up to. We know you're using again, that kind of thing, and we want you to get help. It may, I mean, ultimately that's where we want it to wind up, absolutely. But the one thing we can control is we're no longer BSing our way through this. We all know what's happening here. And we want you to seek some type of help. What are the pros about doing a meeting? It's not as risky as an intervention because it doesn't have that vibe to it. I'm going to talk about an intervention in a minute. Well, let me just clarify the difference. An intervention is a meeting with bottom lines. An intervention is a meeting with bottom lines. Do you guys know what I mean by bottom lines? Bottom lines are, Joni, if you don't go to rehab, you're no longer allowed to live in our house. Rich, if you don't go back to your outpatient therapist, we're no longer paying for you to go to school. That's the bottom line part. The rest of it is the same. Do you guys get it? Like the rest of the conversation is the same, but in an intervention it ends with, and if you don't do that, fill in the blank. And that's why an intervention is much more intense than a meeting. So the cons of a meeting, it might not get it done. The person might what? Okay, yeah, all right. Or screw you, I'm not going to do it. Or you're crazy, I don't have that problem, you need help. Denial, that kind of thing. Now, I will tell you that if you look at it statistically, this is technically called a level 1 intervention if you really get down to it. It works about 63% of the time. It gets the person moving in a positive direction about 63% of the time. So, I mean, that's not every time, but that's better than average, better than half the time. Another option is a good old-fashioned intervention. Now, not an intervention like you see on TV with A&E intervention whenever they surprise, hey, we're going over to Grandma's for a birthday cake. You're like, well, Grandma's birthday's in July. No, it's not. We moved it to December. You moved Grandma's birthday? Yeah, we can do that. She's old. We got to do that. We're not sure she's going to make it to July. And the person's all high, and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, man. Maybe she has some Oxycontin I can steal. That was good. It was kind of insensitive, but it was good. You got to admit, it fit in with the whole thing, right? So you go over to Grandma's house for the birthday party. You walk in, and everybody's sitting in a circle, and you surprise the person. That's not how I recommend interventions are done. Believe it or not, I recommend you invite the person to the intervention. And most of the time, the person will come because the last thing they want to do is have you talking to everyone else about them without them being there. So they do come. But the idea is, hey, you got a problem and you need to do something, and if you don't, we're going to have to make this move. You know, the good thing about that is you're throwing down. You're drawing a line in the sand, and something's going to be different after that. You're going to feel like you did something, and you did do something. The bad thing is sometimes that's tough. It's very emotional. A lot of people don't like that level of conflict. At FAVOR Greenville, we don't do interventions like this anymore right now. We don't have the staff to do it. I'm the only interventionist on the team. One of the goals moving into 2019 is to train a team of interventionists. We will also be charging for interventions at FAVOR. It'll be the only service that we charge for. We'll charge on a sliding scale. That we got professional advice on that. Anybody want to take a guess on why we have to charge for interventions?
Make sure they're serious.
You've got to make sure they're serious. You cannot, this isn't something you just sort of let me try it out. You can try out group if you want. You can try out a family meeting if you want. But if we're going to do an intervention, you need to have a team of about 5 people, and we need to make sure that you're going to follow through on it, and you need to have skin in the game. So, but this is where, you get it done, right? Another option, the fourth option is you can detach. Everybody's heard of Al-Anon, right? And you've all probably heard the term detach. Detach with love. That is an option. Detach is you don't have to do anything, but you make sure you stop enabling behaviors. So you don't have to confront the person. You don't have to do an intervention, but you sit down, and maybe you sit down with a coach, or you make a phone call to the crisis line tonight, and you talk through. And let's say, for example, you're paying their rent, but they're using their own money for substances. what you do is you stop paying the rent, but you don't have to confront them on it. You can just let them know. You shoot them a text, hey, by the way, I'm not paying the rent this month. What? That'll ruin somebody's night. Right? And then you sit back and you, what? Wait and see what happens. Now, what's the theory behind detachment? Let the natural consequences unfold. And this is also where, and I want to go on the record and say, we don't believe in this, but this is also where the idea of hit bottom comes from. You step back from the person, you let them fall, and as they fall, they're going to figure this out on their own. But I will tell you, you don't even have, it isn't even about necessarily letting them hit bottom. You might be there. We've talked in here before about folks who can chart their own progression through this process, and they can say, I remember when I got to detachment. Some of the ways to know whether you're getting close to detachment, one is you're just completely worn out. You're just worn out, you know, and what do I mean by worn out? First of all, you're physically exhausted from the situation. Secondly, you're emotionally worn out because your reactions to it start to change. You've heard it so many times, you've seen it so many times, you've responded to it so many times that, believe it or not, it starts to have less of an effect on you. The jump is a little bit less. Does that make sense? What's that all about? It's called exposure. It's called callousing. You're getting emotionally blunted to the situation. That kind of thing. Maybe it's a circumstance where there's danger involved or there's property being stolen. That'll move you along toward detachment. Verbal abuse, physical abuse, that kind of thing. But when you're in detachment, it's a feeling a lot of times people talk about. Can anybody here relate to that? Would anybody be willing to share their experience on that? Does anybody had that experience that they would want to talk about?
I think I'm starting to get there.
You feel like you're getting close to it.
Yeah, and you touched on whether it's anger, the yelling or this or that. It's not so much that. It's actually the money after a while.
Yeah.
It gets a little old.
It wears you out.
Yeah.
There's a limit. You know what? One of the things that gets talked a lot about in terms of like setting boundaries is it's easier to say I can't than I won't. And where money's concerned, families will get to a point where it's like I can't, I don't have it. You follow me? And the key thing with detachment, actually the key thing with all this, but definitely with detachment, is you have to honor your own feelings. So we're not going to talk tonight about codependency and what is codependency and what's not codependency, but one of the hallmark symptoms of codependency is you ignore your own feelings. You ignore that little voice in your head that's saying, like, this is getting old. I'm getting tired of this. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep paying this. And you tell yourself, no, but I got to. Well, what I'm here to tell you as a professional, as a person who's done this for 19 years, you are allowed to honor your own feelings. Actually, guys, it's healthy if you honor your own feelings. And the person is actually more likely to find long-term recovery if you honor your own feelings. What we say is, though, like what we don't believe in that other people believe in, we don't believe you got to be tough about it. You guys know what I mean by that? You don't got to cut anybody off and be like, I'm not talking to you. I'm not giving you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You know, all that kind of crap. You can still meet them for lunch. You can still talk to them on the phone. But you can be like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done emotionally rescuing you, and I'm done financially rescuing you. Any questions about these options? There's nothing else out there. If there was some other option, I'd have it on that board. Yes?
Is there different levels of detachment?
I think there's a process toward detachment, right? So it's like a spectrum, like anything else. You're probably more ready. You're probably able to detach in certain circumstances versus others. There are predictable things that kind of like point toward detachment. How long you've been dealing with it is one of the main predictors. The age of the person has a lot to do with it. That kind of thing.
Because I think I was there when we evicted her, but then it got really, really cold.
Yeah.
She's 19 years old.
Yep. The age has a lot to do with it. The thing about detachment where it gets applied inappropriately is it's usually applied across the board. Like you'll hear people like in situations like this just tell people to detach. They won't even have these other options. Well, that's because it was started to deal with it was wives dealing with husbands who were alcoholics.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like it made a lot of sense in those situations,
Yeah, that's different.
but not for a 19-year-old. It was never designed to even, the system, guys, just so you know, the system never was designed with a 19-year-old in mind, or a 22-year-old, or a 25-year-old. It was designed for middle-aged white alcoholics. And that system that was designed in 1975 for middle-aged white alcoholics is still the system that's being used to try to respond to 22-year-old heroin addicts. And we wonder why there are 73,000 people dead from a drug overdose. This isn't a mystery. There's no confusion around what's going on here. The system is failing people. And what is the system? The people who pay for it. If you really want to get honest, it starts with the people who pay for it. Because I can tell you right now, if the people who paid for it said we're going to pay for something different, all these hardcore like traditionalists would come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, hey, we've adopted medication-assisted treatment." Just want to let you know, that's what we're into. We're into goat therapy. They said they pay for goat. Blue Cross Blue Shield is approving 7 sessions of goat therapy. Go get the spotted goat. That's funny. That's hilarious, guys.
That's how it works.
All right. So, any other?
I'm going to get the goat.
Yeah. So, yeah, it would probably cost $15,000 for the goat is what would happen then. All right. So, any other questions or comments regarding this? All right, you guys, a lot of you know this, but this is just technically the criteria around substance use disorder, severe. It's not called addiction. It used to be called dependency. How many people remember abuse and dependency? That used to be the language that you would hear a lot. It's actually now called substance use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. And if you meet 6 or more of these criteria in any 12-month period, you technically meet the criteria for severe, which is addiction. And, tolerance needs more and more to get the same effect. Well, first of all, use despite physical or psychological problems. That's obvious. If you're told, now here's what's interesting about this. We know that if you're using heroin, or actually I would make an argument if you're using pills, in today's world where they're making a lot of fake pills, that you meet that criteria, because what? You could die any one of these times. But a really common example of this would be somebody who's told your liver enzymes are elevated and they continue to drink. Tolerance, it takes more and more to get the same effect. Withdrawal, when you don't have it in your system, you get sick. Craving, you think about it all the time. Can't control, you intended to drink 4 drinks, you drank 40 drinks. Can't cut back, you're only going to drink on the weekends, but you wind up changing your own rules. Interpersonal problems, people are angry at you about it. Avoid non-using activities. You only go to the party. You're not going to the birthday party unless it has alcohol. Great deal of time spent. It's a full-time job. Work and school problems or role failure. Use in physically hazardous situations, drinking and driving. If you have a pattern of that behavior over any 12-month period in 6 or more of those areas, you technically are addicted, right? But that doesn't, that's not an x-ray, right? And so a lot of people can explain this away. Or they'll try to explain it away. Somebody said something about denial. One of the ways that you can explain this away is you hang out with other people doing the same thing. And as you hang out with other people doing the same thing, what do? You tell yourself that that's the whole world. You literally define the world. These 7 billion people on the planet are the folks that you're using drugs with or that you're drinking yourself to death with. And that allows your mind to justify the continuation of the behavior. One of the hardest things is to kind of get people to recognize this. I actually think more people recognize it than we think. They might not recognize it at the level they need to. They may not know exactly how severe it is, but if they're coming to Favor, for example, they know something's up. They know something's up. Now, I have had cases over the last 5 years where parents have told it was always a dude, they've told their son that they were coming to see me for financial counseling. That's interesting. Seriously, go see Rich. He's a financial counselor. And they've come in, and we were talking, and I started asking them questions about this, and they're like, "What are you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what am I?" And they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. And they're like, they snap, man. They just go berserk. "Oh, they told me you're a life coach and a financial counselor." So,
Save money.
that I am trying to teach them that, yes. So, most people who come in have a general idea, but it's very hard, even though you have a general idea, let me say it this way, Even though you have an idea, you have a problem, it's very easy to minimize it in your mind. The main reason is it's terrifying to let go of it. It's terrifying, the idea of like letting go of this substance, especially if you've gone through like withdrawal. You talk to a lot of people and they know the danger that they're putting themselves in, but they have this incredibly like terrible psychological obsession with it and this withdrawal syndrome, and it's almost like just one more time. I'm just going to do this one more time. I'm just going to get through tonight. I can't deal with this. I got to get through tonight. But then that also becomes tomorrow night, and that becomes the next night, and you wind up living your day, guys, in like 15-minute increments. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing over and over again, and you're not able to look any further than like what's right in front of your face. And it's a very strange place to be. If you've never been there and your loved one's there, it's very hard for me to explain and get you like really to understand what that's like. To know on one hand you're destroying yourself and you're destroying your family, and to be sort of aware of that. I don't know that people are completely unaware of that. They're aware of that. Especially if it's stuff like heroin or cocaine or some of these harder drugs, and to at the same time be absolutely unable to turn away from it. It's a really weird place to be. It's a disease. People say it's not a disease because you give it to yourself. Well, you give yourself diabetes as well, diabetes type 2. The organ that's affected is the pancreas. It stops producing insulin, and you suffer symptoms. It's the brain. After you put something in your body you shouldn't, it stops producing dopamine, and you suffer symptoms. This is what it looks like. On my left, your right, that's the suppression of dopamine over time. So what that leaves you with is an inability to feel normal, an inability to feel any kind of pleasure or contentment. So what do? You endlessly chase this substance. You're trying to pour it into your brain. You're pouring it into an empty bucket, though. You can never fill it up. And you hear people talk about, I started to use to feel normal. And this is technically addiction, if you want to get down to it. Now, we probably deal with a lot of people at different stages of the process, and we sort of approach everybody kind of like from this point of view of like, what do you want to do? How can we help you do it? But this is addiction. And this is what leads to the absolutely bizarre behaviors. It doesn't mean it's okay, though. It doesn't mean that it's all right for the person to do those things. This is just simply for your information so you know what you're dealing with. So you know who you're talking to. It has a lot to do with when you start. All right, we're not going to go through that. How do people figure it out? It's this long assessment process with a bunch of questions. And I'm not going to go deeply into that. It's like it's supposed to be folks like me that sit down and we go through it and we talk, and you kind of at the end of that you produce like a diagnosis. That's used if you're going to treatment. That's used if you're going to kind of like get insurance reimbursement. We don't do that at FAVOR Greenville. If you come in the door, we just want to talk to you about where you're at. Any questions about what addiction is, or any questions about the substance use end of it? Or thoughts? Yes?
I was wondering if you could back up to the slide before the brain and that slide. To me, that's something new I haven't seen before. And
So I did this because one of the things that you'll hear people say a lot is, Rich, okay, fine, your brain changed. Like you'll get them to this point. Wait, where'd it go? Where'd the brain go? There it is. So you'll my wife says that a lot about me. Where'd the brain go? Now that was funny, right? That was hilarious. All right. So you can get people to buy into this. Because they look at that and they see something and they're like, okay, that's scientific evidence. We get that. But what they'll say is, but you did it to yourself. It's not a disease, Rich. It's a choice because you decided to take those drugs. But come on, get serious. How many diseases are a result of taking something? How about lung cancer from smoking? The best example is diabetes type 2. Where the hell did it go? There it is. All right. So diabetes type 2, type 1 you're born with. All right. Type 2, you give it to yourself based on your lifestyle and your behavior. And literally, you put things in your body that you shouldn't over and over and over again, despite the fact that people are telling you not to, especially in today's world. Don't eat like that. You should exercise. Don't eat. No, I'll do it anyway. And the pancreas is the organ, and it stops producing insulin. Literally. It's the same exact freaking mechanism. And you get symptoms. blurred vision, wounds that won't heal, that kind of stuff. Where addiction is concerned, it's the brain. It's technically the midbrain, but it's the brain. You put things in your body that you shouldn't, despite the advice of people around you. You do it over and over again. It stops producing dopamine, and you get symptoms. Drug-seeking behavior, loss of control, waking up in Las Vegas in strange places. You guys are a tough crowd tonight. A very tough crowd. So this is an explanation more for folks who offer that criticism. For the trolls on Facebook. And for all the people who want to say, like, they did it themselves. Because the people who say that always talk like that. They did it themselves. Then they go eat a Big Mac and slam a Twinkie. Smoke some packs of cigarettes and wonder why they have cancer. But it's a real disease. Now, we really know what the issue is with it being considered a disease. The issue with it being considered a disease is our behavior whenever we're using, right? That's really what the problem is, because when the person's in active addiction, they're so far over the top with everything that they're doing, it's very difficult to be sympathetic. That's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. We've started our emergency room program where we have staff that report to the emergency room and respond to overdoses, and we're expanding that to 4. We're going to have coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at Greenville Memorial for all substance use. We're posting up FAVOR staff in the emergency room. So that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll just say how awesome that is, because Herbert was there one night, and my daughter was an overdose, but we were there for something else, and called the hotline on the way there, and she said, you know, if you'll give me your number and I'll see if he's still there. He sat there and talked to my daughter for
So I want to say something. I want to do a shameless FAVOR plug right now. So Hubert's at the emergency room for a very for 2 overdoses. So his instructions are, and the protocol is, you only respond to opioid overdoses. That's the policy at FAVOR Greenville for the FORCE program. But we have and I'm very proud of this. This is my thing. I invented this. And I'm just saying it out there. Facebook, this is Rich's thing. And we have a policy that's literally people over policy. And so any staff member at FAVOR is empowered in the moment if they can explain to me why they went outside the policy, if it's to help a person. So your daughter comes in, it has nothing to do with that particular job that he's there for. He gets a phone call from the hotline, and he spends time with her on the phone.
She said, no, he can't. We were at the ER. She'd cut her.
So he winds up seeking her out at the ER.
Yeah,
do you understand that? Okay, let me explain that that's going on nowhere else. Yeah, nowhere else. Can you imagine the red tape and the issues that would be associated with? There are people out there that are watching this on Facebook and cringing at the fact that I just said people over policy.
But she's a meth addict, and it was.
Listen, that's what's got to change, guys. This is how this world, we got to shake our head and get some common sense. We're literally living through a situation, and I cannot get over this Pennsylvania thing. I'm going there tomorrow. I'm going there for the holidays, and not like I can do anything. What am I? I'll go strap myself to the state capitol. How in the world can the state that has the most overdoses in our nation be named the model state for the opioid? We're going to have to solve this problem. You guys in this room, places like FAVOR Greenville, we're going to have to solve this problem, because that is absolutely over the top. How did I get on that topic? Seriously. All right.
Being in the ER.
Oh, you brought it up. You did this to me. Okay, all right. All right. So that's what's going on. So we've established this pattern where the person is what? Irrational, unreasonable, not responding to consequences, not responding to feedback, or not accepting treatment. They're out of control, and you're watching it happen. And depending on the relationship and depending on how long you're dealing with it, you're crushed. It's killing you. And it's killing you in all kinds of different ways, but one of the ways is worry, right? So worry, or what other words do we want to put on it? Anxiety, chronic anxiety, rumination. You can't quit thinking about it. You're at work and you're trying to concentrate on your job, but your mind's somewhere else. That kind of thing. So one of the exercises we're going to do tonight is this 10 different steps to deal with worry. And I'm going to ask you guys to offer ideas with this too. All right, so these are 10 proven techniques to deal with worry. It's like David Letterman's top 10. Yeah. Except we start at number 1. one of the most important things to understand is this idea of, some people call it decision fatigue, some people talk about it in terms of willpower. I talk about it in terms of emotional bandwidth. We all can only deal with so much stress. Have you ever heard the phrase, he blew his top? And we've heard that, right? What that describes is a state where things have just piled up on a person so far and so long and so much that what happened? They lose it. And the person that they lose it with may not even be the person who did the worst thing. They lose their temper, they go off, that kind of thing. And what that's about is that, think about it as you have a finite amount of stress, worry, and anxiety that you can handle. So you want to try to, and you have legitimate things to worry about. Your loved one's whereabouts, whether or not they're going to go to treatment, whether or not they're going to complete treatment. You want to minimize all the other emotional baggage in your life, all the other worries in your life, because you got real worries on your plate. And one of the areas is, don't compare your situation to other people's situations. Do not go to church on Sunday and look at the family that's sitting together and think, wow, I wish that, we had that going on. Do not go to this diabolical place and look at the perfect family and the perfect parent posers is what I call it. Because there's a couple things about that. We talk about it. First of all, they're full of crap. That's not how it actually is. It just isn't. It's not perfect. It may not be addiction, but there's all kinds of stuff going on. The definition of life is hard. Life is about struggles. Life is about solving problems. It may not be addiction. It may not be that particular health issue. Heck, it may be something worse. It may be stage 5 cancer. So nobody's walking around in this kind of situation where they have everything tuned in. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, like, people who judge around behaviors or look at other families or look at other parents and judge, what they're really doing, guys, is they're trying to... I guess there are a small fraction of people out there who are just mean, sociopathic narcissists. If you believe the statistics, it's less than 1%. The rest of them are dealing with their own anxiety and fears and their own overwhelming internal process, and they're externalizing it. They're externalizing it. They're trying to make themselves feel better by making you feel worse. Okay? So don't... What's that?
Some people are really good at that.
Some people are really, really good at it. And those are some of the... Those are some of the most problematic people on the earth. Those are some of the most unfulfilled people on the planet. If you take your time, think about this for a minute. Rather than being the person being judged, think about the person who's doing the judging. If you go to Sunday school and you spend your time judging other people, how petty and ridiculous and empty of a person are you? How much of an empty life do you have that you act... Like, I cannot imagine a situation or a scenario that I have a second to judge anybody. Do you get where I'm coming from? Like, how would I even take a minute to notice what's going on with Liz or Joni? Like, where does that even come from? You must be so twisted up yourself to do that you must be in this world of hurt that's hard for us to understand. Either that or you are one of those just like nasty people, and those folks are out there too. Either way, you have to find a way to ignore them. You have to find a way to ignore them. And so what are the strategies on ignoring them? Well, there are various strategies, right? It could be you just aren't around them. I know for me there are some people I just will not be around. The problem with people who are like that is you can't explain to them that they're like that. Do you guys get where I'm coming from? First of all, by a show of hands, has anybody ever been around somebody like that? I can't believe you're all not putting your freaking hand up. I'll do it for you. You have. You just aren't putting your hand up. So if you're around them, you got to be careful, because if you try to defend yourself or you try to explain what you're doing, let's say that they're judging something going on with your son or your daughter, for example, and you try to explain why you did what you did. They are so self-righteous and literally so blind to their own behavior, they will defend it to the end. And that's because they're psychologically protecting themselves. They're protecting themselves from their own fears, their own anxieties, their own shortfalls, that kind of thing. What they don't understand is that I want to give them a hug too. I don't have a problem with them. Whatever your hurt is, we're all in some varying stage of self-development. We're all in some varying stage of bearing some type of suffering, if you want to be honest. That's just the human condition. And so some people, unfortunately, will deal with their suffering by trying to make you have more. And you don't want to be around those folks. If you can possibly avoid them, avoid them. Who can you not avoid? Well, sometimes maybe you can't avoid a coworker. Maybe you can't avoid a boss who's like that. One of the biggest areas are family members. Family members, right? In-laws, that kind of thing. How do you handle that? This could happen at Christmas.
Unfriend them on Facebook.
Well, that's for sure. Block the shit out of them.
Well, I want to make a comment because this kind of happened to me. Not long ago, my cousin,
Remember you are on Facebook.
she lives up in Illinois, and I was sharing a post that another friend of mine, she lives in Aiken, South Carolina. They knew someone had died of an overdose, a young guy. And I was sharing it, kind of like putting the word out that, hey, you know, everybody needs to pay attention to what's going on. And this could happen to anybody. Well, you know, what I was trying to do is share that message. And that's what, you know, we may not want to share information with everybody about our individual loved one, but in a way, I try to always direct them in favor or do something. But my cousin came right back and said, this is not a disease. And wanted to start a conversation, argument with me.
One of the things you could do if you're on Facebook is make sure you friend me and tag me in any one of those.
Oh, that'd be fun.
No, seriously, I live for that shit. Like people say, what do you do for fun? I try to find trolls on Facebook. So I would love that, you know, and that kind of thing. So, but you want to figure out how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to monitor it, and you really want to use your your ability to think it through and reframe it for yourself and not allow that to get to you, and have a really kind of realistic view on what's going on with your cousin. I'm going to tell you something else I firmly believe. And I don't know if this is the case with your cousin or not, but a lot of times people have trouble specifically where addiction is concerned because they've dealt with it in other areas of their life.
I believe she was probably...
And they've never acknowledged it. I'll give you a perfect example. Like a lot of times, some of the most judgmental people around it not being a disease is because mom or dad were an alcoholic. And they have just buried that. And when they hear that it's a disease, what it does is, it's almost like transference, like psychological transference. They lash out because it's too painful for them to remember what it was like to be 8 years old hiding in the closet while mom was hammered. But they will never talk about it because remember, what we're dealing with, guys, is for the first time in the history of America, we're actually talking about this issue. We're dealing with 200 years of intergenerational trauma where addiction is concerned that was never discussed. So most of the people who have an issue with it being a disease is because they were directly impacted by it in their family. But they would never say that. They would never acknowledge that because, again, you guys know this. You're here. You know what it's like to actually admit this is going on. What's it like? I mean, it's pretty scary.
Well, too, I wanted to try to, because I believe somewhat of it's hereditary because we've seen it come from my dad and his brothers and on down the line, and my son's dealing with it now. But I was trying to get the message out because my aunt, her granddaughter, which she raised, is also struggling with drugs. They're from Alabama, but it's all over the country. My family's all over the country, and I think a lot of them are dealing with the same thing. So I was trying to share your video, you know, and get that message out, you know, to them because I think it's in our family, all in our family. Right.
So anybody out there watching, share this when you get back. Anybody out there watching, I'm smarter than you, I'm more educated than you, and it is a disease, and my phone number is 864-764-8504. So share that with your aunt and your cousin. And seriously, call me, and I will be kind, and we will have a conversation. But I want you to understand, though, just from like an educational standpoint, I'm more accomplished than you. I'm also more intelligent than you. See, that's the kind of stuff I like to do. All right, so here we go. What else can you do? We've talked about this in here before. This is best to be done if you have somebody you can do one-on-one with. And this is the idea, trying to focus on the worst case scenario. And the idea is, if you look it in the eye, that it loses some of its power. The problem where addiction is concerned, the worst case scenario is actually the worst thing that can happen. So you have to do this under the right circumstances. This is used for worry in general. But it's the idea of, if this happened, could I live through it? Because a lot of times the problem with worry is you go down that trail that's maybe not really what's going on right this minute. Does that make sense? A lot of times the thing that's happening for you right that second isn't actually the thing that's worrying you. The text message wasn't returned, or they won't answer your phone call, that kind of thing. It isn't about that, or they left the treatment center, or they're not going to meetings anymore. It's not that has you worried. What has you worried? Well, then, here's what's going to happen. So that's the principle behind this. I don't want to talk a lot about that because that's best done one-on-one, guys. It's best done one-on-one. This is a proven technique to reduce worry. It sounds a little unusual, and a lot of times you have to suspend judgment and give it a try. And you probably have to try it for about 2 weeks. Here's how it works best. You pick a specific time of the day. It doesn't matter whether it's morning or whether it's night. It just has to be the same time of the day every day when you're going to do this. And you give yourself a time limit on how long you're going to worry. And you tell yourself that that's your designated worry time. It's best to do with pen and paper. It's not even best to do with typing. It's proven to be most effective when you actually sit down and you pull out your journal, and you're supposed to write what's called free association. Free association is you just let it fly. And you write about what you were worried about that day, or you write about what you're worried about tomorrow. You write everything down, and you stop. You set a timer and you stop after 10 minutes. And you do it again the next day, and you do it again the next day, and you do it again the next day, and you're telling yourself that you're putting off, you're not telling yourself you're not going to worry. You're telling yourself, I'm going to worry at my designated time. And then what that does is that conditions the brain to basically say, I'll get to that when I'm going to get to that. I think I have it. Oh, I have it right here. It's also very similar to putting a pen and paper by the nightstand. It's trying to get it out of your head. That's the trick that you're trying to tap into here. Get it out of your head and tell yourself, I'm going to get to that later. Because remember, one of the interesting things about worry serves a function. Worry was very, very useful when we were all living in caves, or we were on the savannah. Or from an evolutionary point of view, can you see how worry would be useful? I mean, the dude who was chill was getting eaten. That makes sense? The guy who was worried was living longer than everyone else. Because you had to be worried. You had a lot of physical danger. The physical danger to a certain degree is gone. What has happened? The worry process is not gone. That's still hardwired into our brain. It's been replaced with potential dangers and creations. And there's a problem-solving component to worry. Would you guys agree with that? Part of you, if you can think about what it's like whenever you're entering into the state of anxiety and worry, you're literally sort of like thinking it through almost as if you're going to find a solution to it. To a scenario that you've worried about 100 other times and you haven't found a solution to. So that's the idea of writing it down. That makes sense? So first of all, around writing, keeping a pen and paper and journaling. Anybody have any thoughts or anything that they do in that area?
Did you actually keep number 3 and 4 kind of related or not?
Kind of clustered. I'll be honest with you. You could do either one. Most people do this. People do not buy this. I can't get a lot of people to do that. Yes?
One thing that I've learned to do recently through a group that I'm at my church is kind of new agey, but this particular theologian says to allow the worry to be there and all the negative thoughts and don't fight them just say, I've got them, this is what I'm feeling, and don't fight those feelings, don't fight them, just accept them and let them flow. And as you do that, it releases some.
So it's not new agey. It's actually older than time. It's Eastern kind of like religious point of view.
In those moments
Yeah.
when you finally accept that you're gonna worry and you're scared to death, that's when the magic, the spirit, whatever comes through and helps you to either come up with a solution or just let it go.
Yeah, so it's this idea of what we resist persists. That's kind of like what you'll hear. And so it's literally like just recognize and let it go. Recognize and let it go. I got to tell you something, Carol. I'm more of a cognitive behavioral kind of guy. Carol will be doing a seminar next Monday on letting it go. I just want to let you know, though, what it's going to be like. Okay, are you ready? Ready? It's going to be an hour and a half of let it go. Let it go. Carol's top 10 ways to deal with worry. Recognize and let it go. And you got to talk like that when you do it too. I'm just kidding. That stuff's good. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That has been something that I have just absolutely, I completely believe in that. I get the logical principle behind if you fight against something, it kind of like gathers strength. I get that. I've just never been able to personally. I'm more of like a concrete kind of person, but that would be a definite thing to tap into in this regard. This is an interesting idea. Now remember, I do this through I own an EAP company that I do work with called Wellness Partners Group, that we do work with corporations. So this isn't only for addiction. This is for any kind of stress. And it's interesting that this idea of finding a consultant who has expertise in the specific area that you're worried about. So if you're having financial concerns, you get somebody who has some type of like financial sort of like understanding how to handle bankruptcy. If you're having addiction concerns, what do? You get somebody who has some type of understanding around addiction. This is what we were talking about before group. When I was talking about how people text me and ask questions, that's what's going on. Because the brain associates the expertise with relief around the issue. This is the case with anything, guys. This is what happens when you talk to a doctor and they tell you what's going on with your child, even though your mom told you the same thing. You get relief from that. So for you guys, we have coaches. We have a 24-hour on-call line. We have this group every Monday. Other groups exist where you can find this person. A therapist could provide this. You want to make sure it's somebody who has some type of expertise in this area. And then what's the second quality they should have? They should be nice. They should be kind. They should be supportive. You don't want somebody, I mean, they could be the biggest expert in the world, and if they're just giving it to you, you don't want to hear that. That's not going to help. Any questions about that part or comments? Logical, right? Number 6, we've sort of talked about already. I wanted to add one factor to it. In addition to toxic people, you also want to try to avoid other worriers.
How about if you're married to them?
Well, you can't do that. No, because you're both in the same situation.
We're looking at each other. We keep,
Yeah.
I'm starting to forget about it. She reminds me of.
Okay, so this is a very, very common phenomenon. This is a very common. You have to. Here's a real solid recommendation in that area. You're going to talk to each other, and you're going to like go back and forth. And believe it or not, that's not as problematic as doing it in your head. It's actually relieving. I'm talking about people outside of that relationship. That's not good. But you want to have a cutoff time. You literally want to have a cutoff time. Like, we are not going to talk about this after 7 o'clock. We're not going to talk about this after 8 o'clock. Because what happens is that your ability to deal with those conversations, it gets harder and harder to keep them in perspective. So when my wife and I were going through what we went through with my son, my 5-year-old who wound up in the hospital, and we didn't know what was going to happen to him, my daughter, that kind of thing, I noticed that when I would talk about that first thing in the morning, and when I talked about it, it had a different outcome. I literally would leave it feeling almost hopeful, like as if we just sort of figured something out. But at night, No way, man. It was like adding fuel to the fire. Why is that? Because your ability to be rational goes down as the day goes down. You've dealt with all these other things all day. You don't have that wherewithal to manage it. So I would literally say, we're only going to talk about this until like 7 o'clock, or we're only going to talk about this certain times, that kind of thing. Does anyone else have any suggestions if you're dealing with this as a couple? That's all right, Phil. You can have your phone. Joni, don't you dare hit him. He's allowed to have his phone on. This is my group. So, all right. So, anybody else have? Because I think that's a great point. This idea of couples dealing with this with a child. You're going to talk about it, and I don't think for a minute that that's what this is. This is not applied to that. This is for other chronic worriers like outside the family. This would be other chronic worriers that are worrying about other things. Well, I mean, I guess I first should ask, do you guys know what I mean by a chronic worrier? Have you ever been around somebody who that's just sort of their default? And it's not because they're a bad person. It's a personality thing, believe it or not. People label that pessimistic. Has anyone ever known anyone like that? I do. I mean, it's like, yeah, hey, it's a nice day today. Well, it's freaking hot.
It's gonna rain tomorrow.
It's going to rain tomorrow. It's freaking hot out there.
It's hot in here.
I said, well, you got a nice car. You got a raise. You got a nice car. Yeah, but the payment's very $175. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I live with one.
You live with one. Well, you got to figure out how to negotiate that, and you have to try to find some positive people. There's this thing called mirror neurons or emotional contagion, where we take on the characteristics of the people around us. Did you know that? Tomorrow at FAVOR Greenville, I'm rolling out like we have a very, very ambitious initiative for 2019 that involves a lot of things. Like we have some great opportunities at FAVOR Greenville. We got this hospital project. We're adding 4 staff to that. We're expanding to Spartanburg and Anderson. We feel good about a contract that we have in those areas. We have an opportunity to expand to other places in the state. We're being rolled into some for-profit opportunities. We have all this cool stuff going on. So we're getting together tomorrow at 9:30, or excuse me, at 10:30. Our regular staff meeting is really going to be talking about our core values. And I've gone through that tonight, and we talk about positivity, and that you have to be intentional about positivity. You can't allow it in. Because if you you can't allow negativity in. If you allow negativity in, it spreads quickly. And if you have, but if you have somebody in your family or in your circle that's grumpy, that's also okay. You have to work with them on how to manage that. They have to learn how to not be as grumpy in certain situations. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe this, not everybody has to be the same, and this is going to sound strange. Everybody's version of positive is different. So positive for Rich might be, I get pretty jacked up, you know what I mean? But positive for somebody else on our team might not be quite there. Does that make sense? It's not that we have to all be cookie cutters. It's that we have to avoid the negativity. What is the negativity? It's the statements. It's the everything sucks stuff. It's the they suck, this kind of thing. That kind of thing. It was like me talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers until last night. That was a good thing last night. It was great. The Pittsburgh Steelers, it was the equivalent of Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star. They took down the evil empire, Tom Vader. I think Tommy Vader might be on his way out. I mean, I really think so. So, all right. So avoid toxic people. This is an interesting one. They've studied the effects of negative news stories or continuous exposure to conflict on the news. And this is our world that we live in right now. What's interesting is when you look at cable news and you look at what's going on, literally cable news has gone to what's called a clickbait approach to get ratings. And clickbait is not actual content. It's conflicts because they want people to just stick and stay for 30 seconds. That kind of thing. So the news really isn't the news anymore. It's a steel cage match. It's literally the same thing on every channel. It's one person on this side of the fence, this person on this side of the fence arguing with each other, and then they do it over again, 2 different people. And then they do it over again, 2 different people. Doesn't matter what you believe or what your personal take is on politics. It's all ridiculous. That is not news. No matter what channel you're watching, it is not news. Also, if you're dealing with stress in your life and you're dealing with worry, and an addiction is stress and worry, this will also add to your bucket. So you might want to take a look at how you handle that. You might want to say, how much time do I want to spend in that area? Come back to that down the road whenever some of these issues are resolved. Any comments about this part, about the negative news media?
It's not just cable news.
It's everything, right? It's everything.
Social media.
It's interesting, the world we live in right now, we're in the middle of basically, I guess you could say like a three-headed monster, unprecedented areas in behavioral health. One is are these overdoses. Now, one thing we have to say is 88,000 folks die as a direct result of alcohol every year. But it's chronic and it happens over the long term and it gets labeled other things. Cancer, heart disease, that stuff. But it's definitely a direct result of it. That's always been the case. But these overdoses, guys, I was looking at this because I can remember when I got in recovery and I would go and they would say, like, addiction is out to kill us. Addiction is out to kill us. When I got in recovery, that's 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago, 10,000 people died of a drug overdose. This past year, 73,000 folks died, okay? Suicide rates are at about 45,000 a year. They measure, the Pew Institute measures loneliness. And they ask people questions like, do you have a close friend? There's like 40-some% of Americans say they don't have a close friend, okay? Record-setting levels of anxiety and depression among college students. And what this has been labeled is, they're calling these deaths of despair. So what's really going on, guys, is we are at a cultural crisis as a country. Like we are not in good shape in a lot of different areas. Negativity, envy, comparisons, all those different things that are being fueled, and they are being fueled by social media and different technology platforms. But here's the thing, the technology platforms aren't going away. So what we need to do is we need to convert this to positive technology platforms. Does that make sense? Because they're not going to go away. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but when cars came out, there was we were sure that was the end of the world. And it was interesting, there were no, should I tell you this? I'm going to tell you this, whatever, it's my group. Because it has not a lot to do with addiction, but it's interesting, when cars came out, they were lamenting things because there were all kinds of accidents. It was horrible. There were no rules. You could drive wherever the hell you wanted, on whatever side of the road. What happened? You started to make rules. You started to put in windshield wipers. You started to say you got to drive on the right side of the road. You got to use your turn signal. You follow it. So we are now at the beginning of the social media process, and the rules aren't in place. You will see without question that you cannot get on social media until you're 18. No doubt about it. And they're already working on a solution to that. It would be an encrypted code that you have to change that changes like multiple times, over and over and over again, that the person couldn't get until they were 18, so that it can't be stolen. The technology is there to be able to make it that I can't get on if they don't want me to get on. The reason that they're not doing it isn't even because the social media companies don't want to do it. It's because privacy activists and things are saying we can't do that. That's not how we roll. It's got to be open. You can't say who can get on. What if they decide Joni doesn't want to get on because Joni's conservative? What if they decide Liz doesn't want to get on because she's too liberal? Do you follow me? Like, that's the reason why it's not going on right now. But you could limit access, because the problem is, without question, social media is designed with this thing called intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is the exact same principle. It's why you become addicted to gambling. The reason you become addicted to gambling is because occasionally you win. Okay? The reason why you keep pulling the slot machine is because every once in a while you get a payoff. That's the only reason the brain goes back. The reason that you go back to Facebook is because every once in a while you get a payoff. You get 38 likes, 138 likes. You want to know why you do? Because periodically the algorithm drives you only to your friends. And then you know what it does? It pulls you off of that and sends you to strangers who don't like your post. Do you guys get this? You can tell, I can tell. First of all, I'm a social media freaking expert. I'm a social media magnate. And I can tell when I'm off the algorithm because I'll be getting like likes from people who I've never even met before. So why are they doing that? They're doing that so the 13-year-old that's in middle school, that's just what's it like when you're in middle school? You're begging for that like. Imagine what it's like for our kids. You know, for some of you this might be harder than others. Anybody remember middle school? Middle school is when you literally, for the first time, junior high, when you first realize that there are cool people and not cool people, that there are successful people and not successful people, that where you sit at the lunch table matters, that the clothes you wear matters, that we're not all the same. That's about middle school. That's developmentally, that's just how the human brain works. So that sucks for everybody. Middle school should be outlawed in general. People are being cruel to one another, that kind of thing. But the difference was it ended. If you weren't popular, you were only not popular from like 8 to 4. Yeah. Now what happens? If you're not popular, you are not popular 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're constantly checking your phone to see if you got a little bit more popular. So what does Zuckerberg do? Yeah. Zuckerberg creates an algorithm that will occasionally make you popular, and the rest of the time pull that away from you. So that your brain says, I got to go back for more. I got to go back for more. It's addictive. It is designed to be addictive. If you want to read a book that'll blow your mind, it's called The Four. It's about Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. And it's about the scientific process of the manipulation, the hacking of the American mind, if you will. So we're setting up a generation that's what? Begging for reinforcement. Begging for reinforcement. And we're sending them out into a desert that doesn't have any support for that. The way we're going to have to fight it is we're going to have to get on those platforms. Actually, we're going to have to create other platforms and get in there and basically find a way to combat that message, fight fire with fire. Now that we know that, what else do we need to do? Worry does not prevent the bad outcome. When you talk to people, when you do anonymous surveys, a lot of times people will say, if I don't worry about it, I feel guilty. I have to kind of like figure this out or I feel guilty. Worry doesn't actually prevent the bad outcome. Make sure you're not telling yourself that. Prayer and meditation. Carol was talking about meditation, prayer, quiet time, even if it's not prayer, if it's not meditation, even things like setting aside time to read. You're starting to slow your brain down. What's one of the phenomenon around worry? It's like if we were to kind of put it on TV or sort of like watch it, it's fast, right? It's speedy. It's bouncing from thing to thing. And so what if you're able to start working on slowing your thinking down? Slowing your mind down. I think this is a lot of stuff that you're talking about, Carol. Routines around this are very, very positive. So prayer in the moment when you're worried is good. So if I start to get preoccupied with something and I'm worried about a favor, I'm worried about something with one of my kids or whatever, obviously praying in that moment is good, but also a routine around this. Does anybody have a routine? It's typically morning. A lot of times people will talk about doing this in the morning.
Take a walk.
You do? Have you ever gotten up late and been like in a rush and you're sort of like, I mean that happens to me quite a bit. I've been having trouble lately keeping track of my keys. Yeah. So I had this experience, man, and some of these people in the room know this happened. So, I mean, I've been running full out for like, I'm so glad that I'm off tomorrow, guys. I got to tell you, like, I'm off through the holidays. And so I got to tell you.
I thought you were coming tomorrow to tell us the news.
I am. I'm talking about after that. I'm leaving right when I'm done with that. Like as soon as I'm done, I'm mic drop out. And so, I mean, I've never been stretched the way I have the last 3 or 4 weeks because of these grants and things that have come down from the state. It's all good stuff. It's great opportunities, but we had to get these turned in. And you know, I've been working till like 1 or 2 in the morning, pretty much every night for the last, I bet you 21 days, literally straight. My family's in Pennsylvania, and so I can do that right now. What the hell was I talking about? Oh, okay. So my keys. I was up to like 4 in the morning last night, so give me a break. So my keys, I go home and I get out of the car one night and I must have put my key, I take my key, I don't even know why I would do this. I take my key out of my pocket and I put it on the trunk of my car. But I don't, why in the world would anyone do that? So I go in the house and I get up the next morning and I can't find my key. So I'm doing what you do when you can't find your key. In your room, out of your room. Have you ever done that? Walk in the room, come back out, come back in, come back out. My wife's not there to find it for me. This is a key part of this. So I have no one to ask, and I'm going on and on. I walk outside and I see the key sitting on the trunk, right? And I didn't get angry until I saw the key and it was on the trunk. And I'm like, you mother, and I'm like stomping my feet, and I'm sure my neighbors are like, what is wrong with that guy? Because there's nobody else around. It's just me and my key. So that's how I know, and I'm joking about that, but that really, like, I can tell in my life when I'm pushed, because I'm not even being funny. I can never find my keys. And what's going on there? My mind is being stretched too far, too fast. And one of the ways to combat that is to try to like slow it down, especially first thing in the morning. If you're able to get up in enough time that you can kind of take your time a little bit to get in the car and get to where you're going, you tend to set yourself up for a better day. Would you guys agree with that? Yes. So, and if you're dealing with addiction, where you're dealing with worry, and you're also probably dealing on any given day with situations you have to figure out, phone calls you have to make, this might be something that you want to institute as soon as possible. We've talked about the free three before. These are 3 areas proven to reduce stress. And again, it's not if you do them one time. You probably have to do these consistently for a while. Laughter. We're laughing a little bit tonight, but I mean, you can find things. You have access to all kinds of different things that will make you laugh. What's a funny movie? Jump on YouTube. Find something that makes you laugh. Music. I would recommend going with something that's a little bit upbeat, but hey, whatever you're into, what's going on there? You know, if it's upbeat, kind of improve your mood, and then going outside. These three areas will reduce. Now, it's not necessarily related to worry. It's definitely related to stress. Has been shown to be very, very effective, and it's called the free 3 because people in my industry joke about it. You know, because therapy costs money, medicine costs money, and this is actually more effective than both. In studies. Think about that for a minute. You go see a therapist for whatever that costs. You go to a psychiatrist, get your appointment, get your prescription, do all that. This is more effective than both. Can anyone relate to that? Do you feel like there's merit in that process? We know even smiling to a certain degree can improve your mood. One of the things that when I worked at Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I worked with a lot of, there's a condition called borderline personality disorder. It tends to be women that deal with this, and it has a lot to do with parasuicidal behavior, suicidal behavior. And one of the exercises we would have, it was called half smile. And you would literally tell them to half smile. It's like this. Yeah, that's what I said. That's exactly what I said when they first were telling us to do it. So what's literally the muscles in your face are connected, and as you smile, it releases chemicals into your brain that improve your mood. So they used to do it. You know what they used to do it with would be chewing on a pencil, because it does the same muscles. And so even smiling, let alone laughing. Now, what's one of the problems with engaging in laughter for folks that are dealing with addiction? What's one of the problems? I mean, I've heard some of you in here say this. You feel guilty. You cannot imagine doing something for yourself, like going out and watching a funny movie or going out and having some fun. You can't imagine it when you're in the middle of a crisis like this. Can you relate? Everyone relate? So you literally have to kind of like talk yourself into this idea. You'd have to give yourself a little bit of a pep talk. Hey, if I do this, I'm going to be better at dealing with this issue as I go through the next week coming up. That kind of thing. Music, again, it's just upbeat. And then outside, what's that all about? Being out in the fresh air. You don't even have to be out in nature. You could get this done just by being outside. You could walk around this building. You could go out in your own parking lot. Nature would be very, very helpful. Nature would be very positive. Now, we call this the free 3, but does anybody else have anything that they do that they would add to this list that's just like easily accessible, doesn't involve pre-authorization from an insurance company? Exercise, absolutely. Releasing endorphins. Creativity, talk more about that.
Painting, drawing, anything.
Yes.
Free drawing.
I cannot relate, but I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
And I believe it 100%. My wife says that all the time. Like, there'll be something going down, and she'll be like, I'm just going to paint. And I'll be like, I just wish that's how it worked for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, back in the day, when I was going through everything I was going through, I was all stressed out. Like, if I could have just, like, went and painted rather than, like, eating a Percocet, life would have been good. Again, that's a joke, guys. I guess I got to use that one in a recovery group. That's not going to go over too well in a family group. But now let's talk about creativity for a minute. There are certain personality types that are absolutely drawn to that. And what's interesting is if you're a creative person, I don't know if you've ever been told this, Dory, if you're a creative person and you don't access creativity, you'll become depressed. If you want to do something interesting, do I have it on here? Let's see here. I do not have it on here. I'm going to pull it up though. There's a website, guys. Let's just go. We'll go right to the website where there are these things called character strengths, and think of them sort of like as personality types. And one of them is creativity. And so the idea is if it's your character strength and you don't spend time in your character strength, then you suffer consequences for that. You suffer increased stress. So I'm going to show you the website. You can take, it's a free test that you can take. The website is Authentic Happiness. And this is the positive psychology website out of the university. Where did it go? Stresses me out. Let's see here. I don't know what I did wrong, but let's try this. I want to get it up here for you. Hold on a second, guys. Bear with me. That's weird how that happens. Here we go. I got it. All right, so here's the website. Okay? It's University of Pennsylvania, but it's Authentic Happiness. If you just Google Authentic Happiness, it'll come up. And then you go up here to questionnaires. And what you're looking at is you want to do, all these are interesting. Where is the, here it is, VIA Survey of Character Strengths. You go on, VIA Character Strengths. I'll go back to it here. So you go under questionnaires, VIA Survey of Character Strengths. You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then you go and you'll have to create a login. And then you go in, sorry, unrecognized username or password. Have you forgotten your password? Stressing me out. But you create a login and it goes. And it's about 120 questions, so it takes about 15 minutes. But it's a personality. It's a character strength assessment. And it'll list your top 24 character strengths. And I cannot believe that mine won't come up here. This is... Let's go like this. Look at what it makes me do.
Oh, I hate those letters. Because there's always one that makes no sense.
I'm gonna snap.
Yeah, let it go.
I'm gonna go crazy. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna use Carol's technique. Just let it go, man. Just let it go, man. Just go paint something, dude. All right. Let me see one more time. Rich J at favorgreenville.org. I don't know what the problem is. All right. Well, I'll let you guys go to it. And what it'll do is it'll list 20. There's literally 24 character strengths or 24 personality profiles. 24 profiles. One of them is creativity. And so the idea is that whatever your top 5 are, you should try to spend time in areas that capitalize on those top 5. Creativity is a perfect example. If I were to say to Dory, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. I want you to go the next month without doing anything creative. guaranteed her mood would suffer. Even if everything else in her life was fine. Actually, what's interesting, even if she gained in other areas of her life, even if she won the lottery, no, this is how like in how much of an important area of your life it is to take a look at. Even if she were to win the lottery, her mood would go up for a minute and then it would come back down unless she gets back involved with her creativity. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Do you? If we were to take it away. And so so my area of character strength is industriousness. That's at the top of the list.
I believe that.
Yeah.
So it justifies my workaholism. Seriously. Like, I work for pleasure. And in America, you're not supposed to do that anymore, which is weird, right? Because that's not how the country like worked for a long time. Like, my grandfather started a timber company when he was 14, became very, very successful. Nobody ever said to him that he was a workaholic. He was feeding his family. Does that make sense? And he also had that in him, where when he was working. And so for me, literally at the top of my list, it's called industriousness. Others are like things like courage, appreciation of art, or excuse me, appreciation of beauty, of natural beauty. That means nothing to me. That means nothing to me. But like, have you ever seen the Chevy Chase thing when they go to see the Grand Canyon and he puts his arm around his waist? He's like, okay, we're good. You know.
But his wife is also gorgeous.
Yes, so he's not doing it for that reason. He's like, okay, that's good. Like, so I could do that if I was, because one of my top 5 is ability to love and be loved. That's one of my top 5. It's like number 3. And so what's interesting is if I went with my wife, I would have a different experience than going by myself. Does that make sense? So the idea is you identify these things, and then you try to say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I focus on spending some time doing something creative this week. Even though I'm in the middle of this crisis, even though I'm in the middle of this situation, I'm going to go ahead and get this done. And that would be the idea around this particular exercise. Now, you can go on other exercises. There's all kinds of different things around quality of life. This is I have a whole program I do with this, guys. I have a whole business that does this. I own a company that does positive psychology. I am a certified positive psychologist, or I don't know what you want to call it. I'm a positive psychologist, as you can clearly see. So there's a postgraduate degree I got from Drexel University for this. I got involved in this for myself, literally to scratch my own itch. I never intended to become a practitioner. At about 4 years in recovery, I just wasn't feeling it anymore. I first got into recovery. Life was great. I was just glad I wasn't destroying things anymore. I just, everything was working for the meetings and stuff. And I was doing 12-step meetings. That wore off. I don't know how else to say it. And people were saying, you need to go to more meetings. And I'd be like, nope, that's not it. I went to therapy. That wasn't it. And then I went and I got a positive psychology coach. And I learned about this and I jumped into this. And I've been actively doing this in my own life for the last, last 14 years. And then I started a program. I've done more of this here, and I can go back to it. My intention is in 2019 to go back to more of this at groups like this and at recovery groups. It doesn't replace other things that you use for stress. It's not meant to do that. But it is a proven way to reduce stress and improve mood. And so take a look at the site and see what Seligman has 4 or 5 books. He's the founder of it. And it's legit. He was the president of the APA, the American Psychological Association, whenever he founded this. So this is not like, this is legit science-based interventions. All right, so guys, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I just want to take one more second, and I want to wish everyone here a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I will not be here. Next Monday, we will not have it. The center is closed next Monday for Christmas Eve. The following Monday, Carol or Michelle will take care of it. Right, Carol or Michelle?
Yes.
Okay. They can decide what,
Oh, that's New Year's.
that's New Year's Eve. The center's open on New Year's Eve, though. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Like I just want to go on the record. We're not closing the center because Clemson's playing. Really? So, what do you want to do? We can make a call right now. We can make a call. We can either have it on the Monday of New Year's Eve. What do you guys want to do?
Let the group make the call.
Have it.
Let's have, anybody, raise your hand. No, we're not, okay. Have the group. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have the group. We're going to stay open. We're going to stay scheduled. We've done good with that over the years.
Okay.
And so if you come, you come. If not, that's fine. And then I will be back the following week, and we'll go back to the lecture series. Guys, try to use these techniques. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being part of this process. You know, we got your back, and we're with you. And believe me, like, as we roll into 2019, we don't, like, I know FAVOR Greenville falls short. I do know that. We don't have all the manpower we need. I'm not happy at all with where we're at with our technology, and I'm not happy with some of the things that we can do, and I know we can improve in a lot of areas. You know, for example, I'm certain that we can develop our own kind of like proprietary CRM, like customer relation management system, where every single person that's ever come to FAVOR Greenville can get at the very least an automated text message or an email at the level of whatever we program. Picture a situation where all 30,000 people who've ever been here, anytime, are regularly getting messages from us. Maybe even videos from us saying, we love you, we're thinking about you. That's where we want to be as an organization. That's where we want to be. We want to never let anyone out of our out of our grip once we get them. And maybe that's not the best way to say it.
Circle of love.
Circle of love. We want to, you know, and because what we know, guys, what we know is that most people who have this issue actually are hurting units. They're not bad people, and for the most part, if you just keep in their ear, because I've done this in my private practice, guys. I've done this. I've seen this. I bet you I've done this with 150 patients over the last 18 years, where I have a very small caseload, and no matter where they are, I'm always connected to them. And but that's on a very small scale. We want to do it on a massive scale. We fall short, but the one thing we're not going to do is say that we're okay, and everything's okay, guys. And your loved one should just come do it again, and it's on him. And you guys are just enablers, and if you got your shit together, everything would be better. We will not say that. I swear a lot, Linda. I'm working on it. I know, I'm working on it. I apologize.
And Rich, I know my favorite coach, our favorite coach, has been wonderful to check.
Who is your favorite coach?
Denton Burnett.
Awesome.
Wonderful
Shout out for
to
Denton. Give him a hand. He's not here tonight.
And he is encouraging every step of the way.
Yes.
We're newly into this.
Yep.
And got a 23-year-old, and he's new, you know, he's
Yep.
just encouraged me, sent me Bible studies, sent me books, sent me.
Just staying involved. Yes, sir.
Yeah, how do you get a coach?
So the best way to do it is, I'm going to give you our call line. That's the best way to do it, okay? And that's also the best way to get a hold of somebody to talk to immediately. We have a 24-hour call line, guys, and you call, and it's a recovery coach. It's somebody trained by me, supervised by me, an extension of what we believe in this group.
Do they swear a lot?
They probably, you know what? I tell you what, I'll give you my New Year's resolution is no more swearing. Yeah. What are you talking about, Tackle McCord? I am going to follow through on this. So we will work tirelessly to try to figure this out as we go ahead. If you need that number and stuff, we'll grab it to you off the table. If we can get a moment of silence, guys, for those still suffering with this disease and for the family members brought in this no choice of their own, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, good deal. Merry Christmas. Here we go. If you need a card,